There is a kind of freedom that cannot be announced with words, posted on social media, or proven with trophies. It is invisible, yet undeniable. Carl Jung believed that true emotional freedom does not shout, it whispers. It reveals itself not in grand gestures, but in subtle, silent signs, signs that only those who have walked through their inner darkness can recognize. Most people believe freedom means doing whatever you want, living without rules, or escaping responsibilities. But Jung saw it differently. For him, freedom was not the absence of limits, but the presence of wholeness. The emotionally free person is not someone who avoids pain, but someone who has learned to carry pain without being broken by it. Think about this for a moment. How often do we chain ourselves not with iron but with invisible ropes, the need for approval, the fear of rejection, the weight of the past, the desperate attempt to control what cannot be controlled? These are the prisons of the modern soul. And many live their entire lives inside them, mistaking comfort for freedom. Yet, there are rare individuals who quietly break these chains. They do not look different at first glance. They may be your colleague, your friend, or even a stranger passing by. But something about them feels light, unburdened, deeply alive. They move through the world with a kind of silent authority, not dominance, but presence. They do not need to prove themselves, because they are free. Jung often said that the psyche longs for integration, for the reunion of our shadow and our light, of our conscious will and unconscious depths. When a person accepts themselves fully, both the beauty and the brokenness, they step into a new kind of power, the power of emotional freedom. And this power is quiet. It does not demand attention. It simply is. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm, yet feeling calm inside. Imagine walking away from someone's judgment and realizing it no longer touches you. Imagine facing your own fears and weaknesses, and instead of hiding them, saying, "Yes, this too is me, and I am still whole." That is what emotional freedom feels like. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. It reveals itself in 7 silent signs, markers that the soul has reached a deeper level of maturity. And the beauty is, you may already be carrying these signs within yourself, without even realizing it. So let us begin. In the words of Carl Jung, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Emotional freedom begins when we no longer live as slaves of the unconscious. It begins when we awaken. Now, the question is, have you awakened? Do you recognize the subtle signs of your own liberation? Because if you do, you may discover something profound, that you are no longer just surviving life, you are finally free. Part 2, Introduction to Jung's Idea. Carl Jung never spoke of emotional freedom as something that could be gained through shortcuts, affirmations, or surface-level positivity. For him, freedom of the soul was not about suppressing pain, nor was it about chasing constant happiness. Instead, it was about the profound work of integration, a union between the conscious and the unconscious, between what we proudly show the world and what we hide in the shadows. He understood that most people live half-lives. They project only a part of who they are, the socially acceptable part, the mask that wins approval, the face that adapts to expectations. Behind that mask, however, lies another reality, unspoken fears, repressed desires, unresolved pain. This hidden side is what Jung called the shadow. And it is the unacknowledged shadow that keeps us emotionally imprisoned. When we deny our shadow, it does not disappear. Instead, it rules us from the depths. We become reactive, defensive, anxious, chained to patterns we cannot explain. Jung described this as being controlled by the unconscious. In his words, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Emotional freedom begins the moment you stop running from yourself. The moment you have the courage to turn inward and face what has been exiled. The wounds you did not want to admit. The anger you buried. The fears you pretended not to feel. When these hidden parts of you are brought into the light, something extraordinary happens, the prison doors open. For Jung, emotional freedom is not about removing emotions, but about allowing them to exist without domination. You do not fight sadness, you learn to listen to it. You do not deny anger, you transform it into clarity and strength. You do not escape fear, you recognize it as a teacher. Through this process, the psyche begins to balance itself. Think of it like alchemy, which Jung often used as a metaphor. In ancient alchemy, base metals were transformed into gold. In psychological alchemy, raw emotions are transformed into wisdom. Pain is refined into compassion. Fear becomes courage. Suffering becomes depth. And when this inner alchemy takes place, the soul becomes free. Freedom here does not mean perfection. It does not mean you will never feel pain again. Jung was clear, suffering is part of the human journey. But emotional freedom means you are no longer enslaved by suffering. You are no longer defined by your wounds. You can hold your emotions, but they do not hold you. This is why emotionally free people often appear mysterious. They are not immune to life storms, but they walk through them differently. They respond instead of react. They observe instead of collapsing. They forgive without forgetting, release without bitterness, and love without clinging. Their strength is quiet, but it is unshakable. Jung also believed that freedom is deeply connected to individuation, the lifelong process of becoming one's true self. To individuate means to peel away the borrowed identities, the false roles, the expectations imposed by family, culture, and society. It means daring to live from the core of your being. And that is the essence of emotional freedom, the courage to be whole, even when wholeness makes you different. So, when we speak of 7 silent signs of emotional freedom, we are not speaking of shallow positivity or a life without hardship. We are speaking of the subtle evidence that a deep transformation has occurred within. The next time you feel calm when the world is restless, or when you find joy in a simple moment that others overlook, pause and notice. This may be your soul showing you that you are freer than you realize. Because emotional freedom does not arrive like lightning. It grows slowly, like dawn breaking after a long night. And once it arrives, it changes everything. Part 3, Silent Sign Number 1, Inner Peace Without Explanation. One of the first and most profound signs that you have stepped into emotional freedom is the experience of an inner peace that does not require explanation. It is not the kind of peace that comes from circumstances, from everything finally going right in your life, from the world aligning with your expectations, or from people behaving exactly as you wish. No. This peace is different. It arises from within, regardless of what is happening outside. Carl Jung understood that most people live at the mercy of the external world. When things go well, they feel happy. When things collapse, they feel broken. Their inner state is a mirror of outer events. But the emotionally free person lives differently. Their inner stability does not depend on the weather of life. They can sit in silence, without needing distraction. They can face storms, without losing their center. This peace is not passivity. It does not mean you stop caring or withdraw from the world. It means you carry a stillness inside you that no external chaos can fully disrupt. Imagine a deep lake. On the surface, waves may rise, storms may disturb the water, but in the depths, there is calmness, silence, unshakable serenity. That is what emotional freedom feels like within the psyche. Why is this so powerful? Because when you are free emotionally, you no longer fight your feelings or the world around you. You do not waste energy resisting reality. Instead, you accept what is, and from that acceptance, you move forward with clarity. This is what Jung called individuation, the integration of all parts of yourself. You are no longer torn apart by inner conflict, so you naturally rest in harmony. People often notice this sign before you do. They may say things like, "You seem so calm lately," or, "I don't know how you handle things so gracefully." What they are witnessing is not indifference, but alignment. They sense the quiet strength of someone who has faced their own shadows and is no longer ruled by them. Inner peace without explanation also changes how you respond to conflict. Instead of reacting impulsively, you pause. Instead of being provoked by every word or judgment, you choose silence when silence has more power than speaking. This is not suppression, it is mastery. It is the realization that you do not have to prove anything, defend everything, or fight every battle. Your peace is more important than being right. Jung would say this peace is the fruit of integrating opposites. When you accept your darkness as much as your light, your weaknesses as much as your strengths, you no longer waste energy hiding from yourself. The inner war ends. And when the war within you ends, the noise of the outer world loses its grip. Have you noticed this within yourself? That strange calm in situations that once would have shattered you. That ability to watch events unfold without feeling consumed by them. That is not apathy. That is emotional freedom whispering, you are no longer a prisoner of chaos. And here lies the paradox. The moment you stop chasing peace through control of the external world, you discover peace arising naturally within. It is silent, but unshakable. Invisible, yet undeniable. And once you have tasted it, you realize this is not a temporary state, it is the natural condition of a free soul. Part 4, Silent Sign Number 2, No Longer Seeking External Validation. One of the clearest signs that you have stepped into emotional freedom is this: you no longer live to be validated by others. The chains of approval, once so heavy, once so invisible, begin to fall away. And with their fall, you discover a strange and powerful liberation, the courage to exist without needing constant confirmation that you are enough. Carl Jung believed that much of human suffering comes from the false self we create to win acceptance. From early childhood, we learn to wear masks. We learn what pleases our parents, what earns praise in school, what gains us belonging in society. Over time, these masks grow so thick that we forget they are not truly us. Jung called this social mask the persona. The persona has its purpose, it allows us to function in the world, to adapt to culture. But when we identify with the persona completely, we become slaves to it. We chase approval like a drug. We feel empty when recognition is absent. Our self-worth rises and falls like a stock market, dependent on the unpredictable opinions of others. Emotional freedom begins when this dependency dissolves. You realize that your value is not determined by applause or criticism. You stop editing your soul to fit the expectations of the crowd. You no longer need to post, perform, or pretend for validation. Instead, you stand in your authenticity, even when it is misunderstood, even when it is rejected. This does not mean arrogance. It does not mean you refuse feedback or shut yourself off from human connection. It means you are no longer controlled by the desperate need for external approval. You listen, but you do not obey every opinion. You consider, but you do not collapse under judgment. You can hold both praise and criticism lightly, knowing that neither defines you. Think of how exhausting it is to live for validation. Every word becomes a performance. Every choice becomes a calculation. What will they think? Will they like me? Will they approve? Jung saw this as a betrayal of the true self. The person who lives this way becomes fragmented, wearing one face for the world while silencing the deeper voice of the soul. But when freedom comes, something remarkable happens. You begin to choose differently. You speak truths that once you would have hidden. You pursue paths that once felt too risky. You allow yourself to disappoint others rather than abandon yourself. And in this act of self-loyalty, you discover a deeper belonging, not to society, not to the crowd, but to your own soul. Jung often wrote about the process of individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are. And individuation cannot happen if you are still addicted to external validation. For as long as you seek constant approval, you are shaped by others' projections, not by your own essence. Freedom comes when you can say, I am enough, even when unseen, even when unapproved. The irony is that once you stop seeking validation, people often respect you more. Your authenticity shines. Your presence feels grounded. Others sense they cannot manipulate you with flattery or fear. You become magnetic not because you try to please, but because you dare to be real. So ask yourself, do you still need someone else's applause to feel worthy? Do you shape your choices to fit expectations that are not your own? Or have you reached the point where the silence of self-acceptance feels more powerful than the noise of constant approval? If you have, then you are carrying one of the rarest signs of emotional freedom. You are no longer chasing love outside of yourself, because you have found it within. Part 5, Silent Sign Number 3, Comfort with Shadow. Perhaps one of the deepest and most unmistakable signs of emotional freedom is this: you no longer fear your own shadow. You do not run from the darker parts of yourself, nor do you hide them behind masks of perfection. Instead, you learn to sit with them, to listen to them, to embrace them as parts of your wholeness. Carl Jung dedicated much of his life's work to what he called the shadow, those aspects of ourselves that we reject, repress, or deny because they feel unacceptable. The shadow contains impulses we judge, emotions we fear, desires we suppress, and weaknesses we are ashamed to admit. To the unexamined mind, the shadow feels like an enemy. But Jung understood that the shadow is not our enemy at all. It is a teacher, a guide, and often the key to transformation. When you are not emotionally free, the shadow controls you from the background. You project your hidden anger onto others. You despise in people the very qualities you secretly carry. You are triggered, defensive, restless, not because the world is against you, but because you are at war with yourself. This is why Jung wrote, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But when emotional freedom begins to take root, something extraordinary happens. You stop fighting your shadow. You stop pretending it doesn't exist. Instead, you meet it with curiosity. You ask, what are you trying to teach me? What part of me have I abandoned? And in that moment of honest self-confrontation, the shadow loses its power to dominate you. Comfort with shadow does not mean indulging every impulse or glorifying destructive behavior. It means recognizing that anger, fear, jealousy, vulnerability, all of these are human, all of these are natural, and all of these can be integrated rather than repressed. Emotional freedom allows you to transform shadow into strength. Anger becomes courage. Fear becomes humility. Vulnerability becomes connection. Imagine the difference between someone who denies their shadow and someone who has made peace with it. The first lives in constant fear of being exposed. Their identity is fragile, built on hiding what they don't want others to see. The second walks with quiet confidence. They are not perfect, but they are whole. They do not fear being judged, because they have already judged and forgiven themselves. This comfort with shadow also transforms relationships. When you accept your own darkness, you stop demanding perfection from others. You can hold their flaws with compassion because you recognize your own. You no longer need to project your insecurities onto them. Instead, you relate human to human, soul to soul. Jung believed that true individuation, the process of becoming fully yourself, was impossible without integrating the shadow. To deny it is to remain incomplete. To embrace it is to step into wholeness. And wholeness is freedom. So ask yourself, do you still run from your shadow? Do you still hide parts of yourself out of fear of rejection? Or have you reached the point where you can look into your own darkness and feel, not terror, but understanding? If you can sit with your shadow without shame, if you can acknowledge your flaws without collapsing under them, you have entered the rare territory of emotional freedom. Because the person who accepts their darkness has nothing left to fear from the light. Part 6, Silent Sign Number 4, Detachment without Coldness. Another silent sign of true emotional freedom is the ability to let go, to detach, without closing your heart. For most people, detachment sounds like indifference. It sounds cold, distant, uncaring. But Jung understood a different kind of detachment, one born not of apathy, but of wisdom. It is the ability to release without bitterness, to love without clinging, to walk away without hatred. Why is this so rare? Because human beings are wired to hold on. We cling to relationships that have ended, to memories that hurt us, to identities that no longer fit. We clutch tightly, believing that holding on gives us security. In reality, it is the holding on that keeps us in chains. Jung once noted that much of our suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our resistance to letting go of them. Detachment without coldness is different. It says, I honor what was. I value what I have learned. But I will not chain myself to what no longer serves me. This is not abandonment, but acceptance. It is the recognition that everything has its time, relationships, seasons, even versions of ourselves. To cling is to deny the flow of life. To detach with grace is to move with it. You see this in emotionally free people. When they are wronged, they may feel pain, but they do not build lifelong prisons of resentment. When love ends, they grieve, but they do not poison themselves with bitterness. When opportunities pass, they do not collapse into despair. Instead, they carry the lesson, release the attachment, and step forward with openness. This kind of detachment is only possible when you are rooted in your own wholeness. If you depend on others to complete you, letting go feels like death. But if you have found your center, the self that Jung described as the core of the psyche, you realize you can love without possession, you can care without control, you can lose without losing yourself. Think of the difference between grasping and holding gently. Grasping strangles, it suffocates both you and the other. Holding gently allows space, breath, freedom. Jung would say that the emotionally free person holds life lightly. They know that nothing truly belongs to them, not people, not achievements, not even their own past. And in this letting go, they gain everything, peace, clarity, and the ability to love more deeply. Detachment without coldness also transforms how you see endings. Where others see tragedy, you may see transition. Where others see loss, you may see transformation. This does not mean you stop feeling. On the contrary, you feel fully, but you do not become enslaved by the feeling. You allow it to pass through you, like a river flowing, instead of trying to dam it up inside. Ask yourself, do you hold on to what is already gone? Do you cling to people out of fear of being alone? Do you replay the past, trying to rewrite it in your mind? Or have you reached a place where you can release with love, honor endings as sacred, and trust life to bring new beginnings? If you can let go without hardening your heart, if you can detach without withdrawing into indifference, then you have touched one of the purest signs of emotional freedom. Because freedom is not about escaping connection, it is about releasing control, so that love, life, and spirit can flow naturally. Part 7, Silent Sign Number 5, Genuine Joy in Small Things. There is a kind of joy that does not depend on achievement, wealth, or recognition. It is not loud, not dramatic, not something that demands the world's attention. Instead, it arises quietly, in the small, ordinary moments of life. To laugh at a child's question. To notice the way sunlight spills across the floor. To feel gratitude for a simple meal. This is not childish naivete. This is emotional freedom. Carl Jung believed that when the psyche is burdened with repression, fear, and unresolved wounds, joy becomes blocked. The soul's energy is consumed by inner conflict, leaving little space for wonder or play. But when integration begins, when shadow and self are embraced, something remarkable happens, energy is released. The person becomes lighter, more open, more alive to life's subtleties. Genuine joy flows naturally. This joy is different from fleeting pleasure. Pleasure comes from stimulation, from external excitement, from something new to consume. Genuine joy, however, is rooted in presence. It is the ability to feel alive here and now, without needing life to be extraordinary. Jung often spoke of reconnecting with the child archetype, the eternal child within us that knows how to wonder, imagine, and play. When you touch that archetype, even briefly, you rediscover the innocence of joy. Most adults lose this ability. They are too consumed with chasing the future or regretting the past. They walk through life blind to the beauty already around them. But the emotionally free person, no matter their age, carries the spark of curiosity. They see colors more vividly, hear music more deeply, experience nature more intimately. They may be 60, yet their soul feels 20. They are not escaping reality, they are fully immersed in it. Why is this a sign of freedom? Because to feel joy in small things requires that you no longer need constant distraction, validation, or escape. You are not addicted to extremes. You are at peace with simplicity. This is why a walk in the park, a conversation with a friend, or even silence itself feels fulfilling. Life, in its raw form, is enough. Notice the paradox: the freer you are emotionally, the less you need from the world. And yet, the less you need, the more the world seems to give. Opportunities appear, love deepens, creativity awakens. But even without these, you remain content. Your joy is not conditional. It is not borrowed from circumstances. It is born within you. Jung might say that this joy is proof of individuation, that the self is no longer divided against itself. When the inner conflict ends, life energy is released. That energy expresses itself not only in creativity and strength, but also in joy. Joy becomes the natural language of the soul that is no longer imprisoned. Ask yourself, when was the last time you laughed, not because something extraordinary happened, but simply because you felt alive? When was the last time you stopped to watch the sky, or felt gratitude for something small and ordinary? If you can do this often, if you find joy in what others overlook, you are already walking the path of emotional freedom. Because in the end, genuine joy is not small at all. It is one of the highest expressions of a free spirit. And once you rediscover it, you realize something profound: life was never meant to be endured. It was meant to be lived, savored, and celebrated, moment by moment, breath by breath. Part 8, Silent Sign Number 6, Deep Authentic Relationships. Another silent yet unmistakable sign that you have become emotionally free is the quality of your relationships. They shift from superficial connections built on masks and performance to deep, authentic bonds grounded in truth. Jung understood that until we make peace with ourselves, we cannot relate honestly to others. When we are enslaved by fear, shame, or the need for approval, every relationship becomes distorted, a negotiation for validation rather than a meeting of souls. Think of how many connections are built this way, people playing roles, hiding their real thoughts, pretending to agree, avoiding conflict out of fear of rejection. These relationships may look stable on the surface, but underneath they are fragile, because they are built on illusion. Jung would say that when we wear a mask, the persona, in relationships, the other person never truly meets us. They meet only the mask. And as long as the mask is there, intimacy is impossible. Emotional freedom changes everything. When you are free within yourself, you no longer need to perform in order to be loved. You no longer silence your truth just to keep the peace. You show up as you are, with light and shadow, with strength and vulnerability. And here is the paradox: when you dare to be real, you create the possibility for real love. Authenticity is magnetic. It gives others permission to drop their own masks. When you are not pretending, people feel safe not to pretend with you. This is why emotionally free people often form relationships that are rare in depth. They are not interested in small talk without substance, nor in connections that drain their energy. They seek resonance. They seek truth. And when they find it, they nurture it with loyalty and presence. These relationships are not always easy, but they are alive. They allow space for disagreement without collapse, for vulnerability without shame, for growth without fear. You no longer demand perfection from the other, because you no longer demand it from yourself. Instead, you can hold another person's flaws with compassion, knowing you too have flaws. This mutual acceptance creates bonds that are resilient, enduring, and nourishing. Notice also how freedom transforms love. For the emotionally unfree, love often becomes possession. I need you to complete me. I need you to stay so I feel worthy. But for the emotionally free, love becomes expansion. I choose you, not because I need you to fill my emptiness, but because sharing life with you brings meaning. This kind of love does not suffocate. It breathes. It allows both people to grow without fear of abandonment. Friendships also change. Instead of surrounding yourself with people who mirror your mask, you begin to gravitate toward those who mirror your soul. Shallow connections fall away naturally, not with anger, but with quiet clarity. You begin to value quality over quantity. Even one or two authentic relationships feel richer than a crowd of hollow ones. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, naturally deepens our ability to connect. As you integrate your own shadow, you stop projecting it onto others. As you accept yourself, you accept others more easily. As you become authentic, you attract authenticity in return. Thus, emotional freedom is never only personal. It ripples outward, transforming the very fabric of your relationships. So ask yourself, do you still perform in your relationships, or do you show up as your true self? Do your connections feel draining, or do they nourish your spirit? Are you surrounded by masks, or by authenticity? If you can say that your relationships are honest, deep, and alive, then you are living one of the clearest signs of emotional freedom. Because the person who is free within themselves no longer fears being truly seen. And in that courageous openness, they discover the most sacred gift, love that is real. Part 9, Silent Sign Number 7, Creativity and Curiosity Return. The final silent sign of emotional freedom is one of the most beautiful, the return of creativity and curiosity. When the soul is no longer imprisoned by fear, resentment, or self-denial, it naturally begins to explore again. Ideas flow. Inspiration awakens. Life once again feels like an open canvas rather than a closed cage. Carl Jung often emphasized the creative function of the psyche. He believed that the unconscious was not merely a storehouse of repressed material, but also a fountain of images, dreams, and symbols that long to be expressed. When we are emotionally bound, that creative fountain becomes blocked. Anxiety consumes our energy. Shame silences our voice. We become trapped in routine, surviving but not truly living. But when freedom enters, the block dissolves. The energy that was once trapped in repression now flows into expression. Suddenly, you feel drawn to create, not necessarily in the grand sense of painting masterpieces or writing novels, but in everyday ways. You might find yourself journaling, gardening, dancing, cooking, or imagining new possibilities at work. What matters is not the form, but the spirit. Creativity becomes your natural language again. Curiosity also awakens. Emotional freedom allows you to look at the world with fresh eyes. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" you begin to ask, "What if I try?" Instead of fearing the unknown, you feel drawn toward it. Life becomes less about controlling outcomes and more about exploring possibilities. Jung might call this the spirit of individuation, the soul moving toward wholeness, driven by a deep inner curiosity about what it might become. This return of creativity is not only personal, it is healing. Jung believed that creative expression is a way the psyche balances itself. Dreams speak in images. Symbols carry hidden truths. Art, play, and imagination allow the unconscious to dialogue with the conscious mind. When you draw, write, or imagine, you are not just entertaining yourself. You are listening to your own depths. Notice also how emotionally free people approach creativity differently. They do not create to prove their worth or impress others. They create because they are alive. Their art, their ideas, their curiosity, all of it is an overflow of inner wholeness. This is why their work often feels authentic and powerful. It is not born from ego, but from the self. Think of a child playing. They do not worry about results. They are absorbed in the moment, discovering, exploring, experimenting. This is what freedom restores, the childlike spirit that Jung believed is essential for individuation. The eternal child archetype lives within us, and when it is freed, it brings playfulness, imagination, and resilience. Ask yourself, when was the last time you felt inspired, not because you had to, but because you wanted to? When was the last time you followed your curiosity without worrying where it would lead? When was the last time you allowed yourself to create something simply for the joy of creating? If you find that your creativity is alive, that your curiosity has returned, then you have touched the highest sign of emotional freedom. Because a free spirit is not just peaceful or balanced, it is vibrant. It is alive with ideas, with wonder, with the courage to explore life fully. And this is where Jung's vision comes full circle. Emotional freedom is not an end, but a beginning. It is the gateway to a life of authenticity, depth, and creation. A life where you no longer merely exist, but truly live, with imagination, curiosity, and the unshakable joy of being whole. Part 10, Final Summary and Message. Now that we have explored the 7 silent signs of emotional freedom, inner peace without explanation, no longer seeking external validation, comfort with shadow, detachment without coldness, genuine joy in small things, deep authentic relationships, and the return of creativity and curiosity, it is time to reflect on what all of this truly means. Carl Jung taught us that freedom is not a state granted by circumstances, luck, or external success. Freedom is an internal phenomenon. It is the quiet mastery of your own mind, the acceptance of your own soul, and the courage to live without fear of judgment or rejection. Each of the signs we have discussed is a reflection of this mastery. They are silent because they cannot be faked. They do not announce themselves. They are not trophies to display. They are felt, noticed, and lived. Emotional freedom is rare because it requires inner work, the kind of work most people avoid. It demands honesty, courage, and persistence. It asks us to look at our shadows, to release old attachments, to stop performing for approval, and to embrace the fullness of life with all its light and darkness. It challenges us to be fully present, fully alive, and fully ourselves. Yet, the rewards are immense. When emotional freedom emerges, life transforms in ways that are subtle, yet profound. You experience calm when others panic. You love without neediness or possessiveness. You create because your soul is inspired, not because you seek recognition. You rejoice in the simple moments that once went unnoticed. You form relationships that are authentic, nourishing, and sustaining. You walk through the world with a quiet authority, not imposed, but inherent. Notice something crucial: these signs do not arrive all at once. They unfold gradually, often without conscious awareness. One day you realize you are no longer enslaved by fear. One day you discover that your joy is not borrowed from others. One day you wake up and see that your creativity and curiosity are returning. Each sign is a milestone along the path of individuation, the lifelong journey toward wholeness that Jung described. It is also important to understand that emotional freedom does not make you immune to pain or loss. Life still challenges, surprises, and sometimes wounds us deeply. But freedom changes the way you meet life. You no longer collapse under suffering. You carry your wounds with acceptance and transform them into growth. You see endings as transitions rather than tragedies. You respond to hardship with resilience rather than reaction. And in doing so, you move through the world lightly, even when facing storms. Perhaps the most beautiful aspect of emotional freedom is its subtlety. It is not loud, brash, or boastful. It does not require admiration from others. It is recognized only by those who are attuned to the depth of the human soul. Jung would say that freedom is a dialogue between the conscious self and the unconscious depths. When you integrate both, you are no longer divided, no longer fragmented, no longer at war with yourself. You are whole. So ask yourself, have you begun to notice these signs in your own life? Can you feel the quiet calm beneath chaos? Can you release the need for approval? Can you meet your shadows without fear? Can you detach without closing your heart? Can you find joy in simple moments? Can you form relationships that are authentic? Can you allow curiosity and creativity to flow again? If you can answer yes to even some of these questions, then you have touched emotional freedom. And if you continue to nurture it, to honor it, and to live from it, you will discover that freedom is not merely an achievement. It is the very essence of living fully, deeply, and courageously. In the end, emotional freedom is the rarest gift we can give ourselves. It cannot be borrowed, bought, or imposed. It is born from within, through honesty, courage, and love for the self. And once it emerges, nothing external can take it away. It is the quiet, unshakable voice of a soul finally at home in itself. So walk forward with awareness. Protect your freedom. Celebrate the small victories, the subtle awakenings, and the moments of joy. Because when you live with emotional freedom, life is no longer a burden to bear, but a mystery to explore, a journey to savor, and a world to love fully, just as Carl Jung envisioned.